5 centuries ago, the legendary hero delivered a final, crushing blow to the Demon King, seemingly ending the long era of darkness that had plagued the land. Following the victory, he stood amidst the ruins with his companions, exhausted but filled with a sense of accomplishment. Though they were drained of magic, he spoke of a future where the Demon King's army was no more and a lasting peace would finally allow everyone to live without fear. This hope was shattered in a heartbeat when a blade erupted through his chest from behind. His allies watched in paralyzed horror as blood sprayed across the battlefield, the sudden betrayal turning their triumph into a nightmare. As he collapsed, the mage desperately called for a recovery potion, but the warrior realized the grim truth. A wound from a cursed demon sword meant certain death, regardless of any protection or healing magic they possessed. The dying Demon King let out a final, mocking laugh, taunting the hero to spend his last moments regretting the naivety that led to his downfall. Then, the darkness of death was broken by a distant, ethereal voice urging him to wake up. He found himself momentarily suspended in a dim space, surrounded by figures who seemed to be watching over his transition. He jolted awake to the harsh shouting of a commander who berated him for sleeping on duty. Gasping for air and clutching his chest, the young man was stunned to find himself alive and breathing in a completely different time and place. He looked up at the armored man with wide, disbelieving eyes, struggling to reconcile the memory of his death with the reality of his current surroundings. The commander merely sneered, questioning why the boy found the simple fact of being alive so strange. After the commander turned and marched away, the young man remained with his group, his mind racing to make sense of the vivid memories of a past life that felt more real than the present. He gazed at the sky, noting that while his internal clarity was growing by the day, his companions insisted he had only been asleep for a mere half hour, during which the stars had barely shifted their positions. He has been plagued by recurring dreams lately, visions of a legend passed down through the kingdom for 5 centuries. It is the tale of the hero and his companions, a story known to every child, yet for him, it feels strangely personal. According to the chronicles, after the hero vanquished the Demon King, he wed the great sage Lapis and spent his remaining years in peaceful seclusion. Sitting beneath the shade of a great tree, the young man contemplates how the stories always end there, in quiet happiness. However, the dreams he sees tell a far grimmer story, one where the hero meets a tragic end. He looks down at his hands, pondering why his parents named him Rinya in hopes he would grow strong like that ancient savior, only for him to be haunted by such dark premonitions. The reality of his life is a far cry from the legends, especially after the day he turned 15 and stood before the statue of goddess Floria. While others received grand titles and powerful skills, his own status card bore a hollow title and a complete lack of magical abilities, leaving him as nothing more than a commoner in a world of gifted warriors. Beyond the safety of the kingdom's walls, the world remains a perilous place where monsters roam and the threat of the demon race looms large. Even as the inner lands enjoy peace, the constant need for adventurers to hold back the tide of darkness is a grim reality for those living on the frontier. Driven by a desire to protect his family despite his lack of innate talent, he chose the path of an adventurer. He knew the road would be difficult without skills, but the smiles of his parents and sister provided all the motivation he needed to pick up a blade. With a look of fierce determination, he resolves to grow stronger through sheer effort. He might not be the legendary figure from his dreams, but he refuses to let those he loves come to harm, vowing to overcome his limitations through grit and perseverance. 3 years of hard labor follow, leaving him stuck at the lowest rank, performing menial tasks like gathering herbs and carrying luggage for others. Just as his hope begins to wane, a recruitment notice catches his eye, promising an opportunity where rank and experience are of no consequence. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoes through the clearing as a massive blade cleaves through the air with terrifying precision. The sheer force of the strike obliterates a formidable beast in a single, fluid motion, sending a shockwave through the surrounding forest. Stunned by the display of raw power, the young adventurer watches as the armored commander scoffs at the lack of resistance. The ease with which a high-ranking monster was dispatched serves as a humbling reminder of the vast gulf between a common soldier and the elite of the kingdom. He marched forward with an impatient stride, barking orders at the stragglers to keep pace as they navigated the desolate ruins. The young man followed behind, visibly exhausted and struggling to maintain his composure under the weight of his gear. The armored leader's patience snapped, and he seized the youth by the collar, his voice dripping with contempt as he reminded him of his lowly status. He made it clear that the boy was only there because he had begged for the chance, calling him an incompetent burden to their A-rank party. Despite the humiliation, the boy steeled his resolve, knowing that enduring this arrogance was his only path to the strength he desperately sought. He reflected on how no one else had responded to the recruitment ad, realizing that the leader's difficult personality was the reason he had been accepted at all. As they descended deeper into the cold, stone halls of the fortress, a chilling sense of unease washed over him. The architecture felt strangely familiar, though he was certain he had never set foot in this place before. They eventually halted before a pair of towering, ominous doors adorned with bleached skulls, which the leader identified with greedy certainty as the entrance to the Demon King's throne room. He boasted that retrieving the demon sword within would finally elevate him to S-rank status. With a heavy groan of stone on stone, the massive portals swung wide to reveal a desolate throne room. At the center, a dark, jagged blade rested upon the seat of power, seemingly waiting for a new master. While the warrior laughed in triumph and stepped forward to claim his prize, the boy froze, his instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. He realized too late that the room felt like a carefully prepared trap. The moment the leader reached out, the throne and the sword dissolved into shadows, leaving him grasping at empty air. His triumphant laughter died in his throat as the illusion vanished before his eyes. In their place, a monstrous, three-headed beast materialized with a deafening roar, its presence radiating a level of malice that paralyzed the entire group. The leader's face paled as he recognized the creature as a Cerberus, a legendary S-rank monster. Before anyone could react, the heavy doors behind them slammed shut with finality, cutting off their only escape. The mage let out a piercing scream as they realized they were now trapped in the darkness with the snarling guardian. She urges the knight to move faster as the party retreats from the looming threat. However, the man she calls out to has no intention of a clean escape, turning instead to command the young hero to remain behind and hold the line alone. He punctuates his order with a violent strike, his armored boot connecting with the boy's chest and throwing him backward into the path of the three-headed beast. He watches with a cold, mocking grin, declaring that even a useless pawn can serve a purpose as fodder for the guardian. With a heavy thud, the massive doors are sealed, leaving the youth to his fate. He is left to face the nightmare alone, his desperate cries for help swallowed by the thunderous roars of the Cerberus as it lunges forward to claim its prey. He manages to scramble away into the shadows, discovering a narrow passage where the air carries the scent of the outside world. Noticing strange markings on the floor, he wonders if this hidden path might be his only chance at survival. He barely has time to process the discovery before the floor gives way beneath his feet. With a startled cry, he tumbles into a dark, vertical shaft, the walls rushing past him in a blur. He hits the ground with a painful thud at the bottom of a long staircase. Shaken but alive, he looks around the unfamiliar surroundings, realizing he has been deposited into a secret, silent part of the fortress. The chamber opens up into a vast, tomb-like space carved directly into the living rock. At its center, a stone altar holds a solitary figure, a long blade plunged through the center of the platform. He approaches the altar with hesitant steps, his eyes falling upon a young woman of ethereal beauty lying in a deep slumber. The sight of the sword piercing her chest fills him with a mix of awe and horror, making him wonder if she is a victim or a prisoner. He leans closer, and the dim light reveals the unmistakable dark horns curving from her head. The truth dawns on him instantly. The beautiful captive is a member of the demon race. He watches in disbelief as the blade, once firmly lodged in the girl's chest, begins to sink further, its cold steel seemingly absorbed into her very flesh. As the weapon vanishes, the girl stirs, her eyes fluttering open as she emits a soft groan. He tenses, his mind racing with the realization that the ancient seal has been broken and she is finally waking. She sits up, her gaze meeting his with a disarming innocence that catches him completely off guard. When she softly inquires if he is a human, he finds himself stumbling over his words, eventually introducing himself as Renya while trying to maintain his composure in the presence of such an unexpected being. Her face lights up with genuine excitement at his confirmation, her previous lethargy replaced by a sudden, energetic burst of joy. She quickly apologizes for her unrefined behavior and, with a graceful bow, introduces herself as Angelica Alcade, expressing a long-held desire to finally meet someone from the human race. The joy is short-lived, however, as the weight of his words sinks in. The revelation that 5 centuries have passed since she was placed in stasis leaves her wide-eyed and trembling with shock. While she grapples with the lost time, he watches her closely, wondering if this survivor of the Demon King's era harbors any resentment toward his kind. She muses aloud, theorizing that her father might have used the demon sword's power to shield her from the ravages of the war, perhaps even foreseeing his own downfall. She reaches out a hand, her voice steady as she explains that despite the atrocities committed by the Demon King's forces, there are many of her kind who yearn for a peaceful coexistence with humanity. With a hopeful smile, she asks if it would be strange for them to become friends, a request that leaves him blushing and stammering. He admits that while the situation is daunting, he is willing to accept her friendship if she truly means no harm. Their tentative peace is shattered by a violent explosion that rocks the chamber, sending dust and debris flying. From the shadows of the corridor, a snarling, multi-headed beast lunges forward, its presence a lethal intrusion into the sanctuary. He draws his weapon, his gaze hardening as he looks back at the frightened girl behind him. Regardless of her heritage, he knows she is innocent of the world's cruelty, and he resolves to use every ounce of his strength to defend her from the approaching threat. He stands firm before the snarling beast, his resolve hardening as he shields the demon princess. Despite her heritage, he refuses to leave her to such a fate, vowing to protect her at any cost. As his determination peaks, a cascade of ancient knowledge and power begins to flood his consciousness. One by one, legendary skills and masteries, from auto-defense and hero magic to the absolute zeniths of elemental, physical, and martial arts, unlock within him, surging through his very soul. The transformation continues as his very identity is rewritten by the world's laws, granting him the title of the Courageous. Beside him, the princess winces, sensing the overwhelming shift in the air as the young man's presence becomes something far more formidable. With the sword in his hand beginning to radiate a blinding, celestial light, the fog in his mind finally clears. The memories of his true self and his past life as Arknight return in a sudden, violent rush, and he finally understands who he truly is. Facing the multi-headed monster with newfound authority, he prepares to strike. No longer just a lost wanderer, he stands tall as the legendary hero, Renya, ready to reclaim his destiny. The dust begins to settle as the monstrous threat is finally vanquished, leaving the young man standing tall amidst the aftermath of the battle. Beside him, the demon princess gazes at the scene in disbelief, her eyes wide at the sudden and overwhelming display of power she just witnessed. He turns his attention toward her, reaching out a hand to ensure she is unharmed after the chaos. She stammers, her voice trembling as she tries to process what just occurred, while he asks with genuine concern if she is all right. Gripping the hilt of his blade, he feels a familiar, surging energy coursing through his veins, the unmistakable power of the hero. He acknowledges to himself that in this moment, he has truly reclaimed the mantle and the strength he once held in a lifetime long forgotten. She watches him with a mixture of confusion and awe, questioning the reality of their situation and what his transformation implies. He stares down at his gloved hand, the weight of his destiny settling over him as he wonders if his soul has truly returned to its former state as the world's protector. The conversation turns toward the impossible as he explains the nature of his existence to the skeptical princess. He reveals that he was a hero who fell 5 centuries ago, only to be reborn in this new era. By comparing his current memories to those from before his awakening, he concludes that he has indeed been reincarnated, a concept that leaves her questioning the very mechanics of life and death. As he ponders his next move, the memory of a spirited ally flashes through his mind, her confident gesture a reminder of the support he once had. He knows he must find a way forward in this unfamiliar time, even as the shadows of his past life begin to loom larger than ever. A wave of melancholy washes over him as he realizes that the world he once knew has long since faded into history. Everyone he once called a friend, family, or comrade is gone, leaving him as a solitary relic of a forgotten age, trying to find his place in the present. Her voice pulls him back from the depths of his memories, and he quickly offers a sheepish apology for his sudden distraction. He briefly recalls the final battle where he subjugated the Demon King and the quiet life he once shared with Lapis, struggling to reconcile those legendary deeds with his current reality. He casually mentions that his previous life ended in a mutual strike against the Demon King, unaware of the devastating weight his words carry for his companion. The revelation that follows stops him cold. She looks him in the eye and declares that she is the daughter of the Demon King, Greed Alcade, the very man he died to defeat. He can only stare at her in stunned silence, the irony of their alliance suddenly becoming a heavy and complicated burden. The realization that he is traveling with the child of his greatest historical enemy leaves him searching for words that will not come, as the past and present collide violently. He stands quietly as the demon princess bows her head in gratitude, her voice soft as she thanks him for putting an end to her father's rampage. She continues, her expression somber yet resolute, explaining that while losing family is painful, being unable to prevent their descent into darkness is a far greater burden. She implores him not to carry the weight of these events in his own heart. The young hero is momentarily speechless, moved by her selflessness, and offers a sincere word of thanks as she confirms that her desire for their friendship remains steadfast despite the blood on his hands. Suddenly, a thought strikes her, and she asks him to wait just a moment longer, mentioning a specific place she needs to visit before they depart. They enter a lavishly decorated chamber, which she identifies as her personal quarters, and she begins searching through her belongings for a specific item of great importance. With a small cry of triumph, she produces a delicate ring box, explaining that the treasure inside is a memento from her late mother. She reveals that her mother was a frail but incredibly kind woman who, in stark contrast to the Demon King, harbored a deep-seated wish for peace and friendship between their kind and humanity. Hearing this, he realizes that her search for the ring was driven by a profound sense of isolation. He reflects on the history of their world, noting that even the death of the previous Demon King 5 centuries ago failed to bring lasting peace. Yet looking at her, he begins to believe that a future where their races join hands might finally be within reach. Driven by this new conviction, he steps forward and firmly takes her by the shoulders, declaring with fierce determination that they should work together to make her mother's dream of harmony a reality. As their eyes meet in the intimate space between them, he vows to walk this path by her side, promising that as long as they are together, they can overcome any obstacle. He watches in astonishment as the demonic horns atop the mage's head vanish into thin air. Startled, he calls out to her, his voice laced with concern as he asks if she is all right. Because of his sudden proximity, she becomes visibly flustered, her face flushing a deep crimson as she wonders aloud if they will truly be together like this forever. He can only offer a hesitant, embarrassed confirmation, caught off guard by her sudden vulnerability. In response to the shared moment, she reaches out and presses a small object into his palm, insisting that he keep the second ring. He looks down, surprised by the weight of the gift. He looks down at the simple band resting in his gloved hand, seeing it as a physical manifestation of their shared resolve and the bond between those who have survived. With a soft expression, he offers his sincere thanks for the token. Moments later, he prepares to depart with the spirited warrior, who insists that he drop the formalities and simply call her by her name. He agrees with a small smile, ready for the next leg of their journey. As they prepare to leave, a snap of fingers echoes through the room, and a complex magical seal begins to glow brightly on the floor, signaling their imminent departure. Meanwhile, back at the guild, the armored commander slams his fist down in a fit of rage, shouting at the staff about the unexpected appearance of S-rank monsters. He bellows that the lack of warning cost him the lives of 2 of his comrades. In the face of his outburst, the young receptionist tries to maintain her composure, explaining that the lack of information was due to the total absence of survivors until his return. She offers a fee for the intelligence he has brought back, hoping to de-escalate his fury. As she finishes her explanation, he scoffs, mentioning the brave soul who stayed behind to face the death Cerberus alone, assuming the man is already dead. His thoughts then turn to the young hero who had accompanied them, wondering about his fate. While he contemplates the loss, a familiar voice suddenly cuts through his grim musings. He spins around to find the very man he was mourning standing right behind him, offering a dry remark about not being killed off so easily. He strides into the guild hall with, and at his side, his presence a silent rebuke to the man who thought him dead. Guren can only stammer in disbelief, his face contorted with shock as he demands to know how the boy could possibly still be breathing. Ignoring the commander's outburst, the young hero approaches the counter and produces a staggering array of materials, claws, skin, and fangs from a death Cerberus. The receptionist gasps, her eyes wide at the sight of such high-rank loot and the effortless use of storage magic by someone she once considered a bottom-tier adventurer. Because of this display of wealth, Guren's shock curdles into a bitter, defensive rage. He sneers, refusing to believe an incompetent could survive on his own, and concludes that the mysterious woman accompanying him must be a powerful mage who carried him through the danger. In response to the insult, she simply smiles, her expression radiating a calm confidence that unnerves the commander. She gently corrects him, stating clearly that it was she who was saved by the hero, Renya. The commander erupts in a mocking laughter, his voice booming through the hall as he dismisses her claim as a joke. He continues to belittle them both, his arrogance blinding him to the shift in the atmosphere. He remains stoic under the barrage of personal insults, but his gaze sharpens when the commander turns his venom toward his companion. While he can endure being called incompetent, he declares with cold resolve that he will not forgive any slurs directed at and, prompting a challenge from the infuriated Guren. Moments later, the two stand opposite each other in the open square, the air thick with the anticipation of a duel. Guren looms large with his heavy blade, while the youth stands ready with nothing more than a simple wooden training sword. With a roar of contempt, the armored man lunges forward, his cape billowing behind him. He shouts that he won't hold back, mocking the boy for daring to face him with such a pathetic weapon. As the heavy blade descends, the youth moves with a fluid grace that defies his opponent's expectations. He brushes the massive strike aside with a casual flick of his training sword, leaving Guren reeling in shock while the boy reflects on the strange unease he felt during his battle with the Cerberus. He realizes that his current physical form has yet to fully acclimate to the overwhelming power of the hero surging within him. As the clash continues, he wonders if this duel will provide the necessary pressure to finally adapt his body to his true strength. He is displaying a level of power that leaves the spectators in disbelief. Angelica, watching from the sidelines, can't help but feel a sense of unease as the crowd whispers about his unexpected strength, questioning how a low-rank adventurer could be so formidable. Seizing the moment to assist her ally, she unleashes a barrage of fireballs toward him. Guren watches with a predatory grin, pleased by the distraction, while the young hero readies himself for the incoming magical heat. With a swift, decisive motion, he cleaves through the magical flames as if they were nothing more than mist. His focus is absolute, his movements becoming more fluid and precise with every passing second of the engagement. The sight leaves the mage stunned, unable to comprehend how a mere wooden blade could dispel her magic so effortlessly. Meanwhile, he realizes that his physical form is acclimating to the hero's power at an incredible rate, far exceeding his own expectations. As the duel intensifies, the onlookers realize he isn't just holding his own, he's actually pushing the seasoned warrior back. Frustrated and humiliated by the struggle, Guren snarls, vowing to stop holding back as he prepares a devastating strike to end the mockery. He bellows a command to his blade, igniting it with a fierce, crimson aura that radiates intense heat. With a roar of turn into ash, he swings his sword, unleashing a torrent of magical fire intended to incinerate his opponent instantly. The resulting exploding heat slashes tears through the air, a massive wave of incinerating energy that consumes everything in its path, leaving the training ground scorched and obscured by smoke. A confident smirk plays on the veteran's lips as the dust begins to settle, certain of his victory. Behind him, the crowd recoils in horror, shocked by the sheer overkill of the attack against a fellow guild member. However, his triumph is short-lived as a glint of what catches his eye through the dissipating smoke. His expression shifts from arrogance to pure, unadulterated shock as he realizes the battle is far from over. Emerging from the blast unscathed, the young hero has blocked the massive blow with his simple training sword. The impact has left Gurren frozen in disbelief, his ultimate technique countered by a mere piece of wood held by a boy he once despised. He offers a word of gratitude to the defeated warrior, acknowledging that the intensity of their clash allowed his own latent abilities to finally settle within his physical form. The veteran, breathless and shaken, can only stare in disbelief as the youth he once dismissed now stands over him with calm authority. To show his respect, the young hero draws a blade that pulses with an overwhelming, radiant energy, promising to reveal the true extent of his might. Panic seizes the fallen man, who pleads for him to halt as the sheer pressure of the unsheathed power begins to warp the very air around them. A colossal pillar of light erupts from the heart of the city, piercing the heavens as a final, thunderous salute to the conclusion of their battle. The shockwave ripples through the streets, leaving the inhabitants to marvel at the celestial display that marks the departure of a force beyond their comprehension. Far from the city's turmoil, a regal figure remains suspended within a massive, glowing crystal atop a towering ancient tree. Surrounded by her kin, the woman waits in a state of frozen grace, the magical seal that has long contained her beginning to hum with a newfound resonance. Suddenly, the crystalline prison shatters into 1,000 shimmering shards as the ancient magic of the ice seal finally fails. She descends amidst the falling fragments, her power surging back into her limbs as the long slumber comes to an abrupt and violent end. Brushing aside the concerns of her startled attendants, the awakened lady radiates a vibrant energy, her mind already fixed on a distant goal. With a playful wave and a determined smile, she leaps away, declaring that her reunion with the one she seeks cannot wait a moment longer. The massive void left in the earth loomed before them, a silent testament to the power unleashed. The young hero stared into the abyss, his face etched with exhaustion and disbelief, while the armor commander beside him could only gasp for breath, his composure shattered. As the dust began to settle, a hand reached out across the barren ground, signaling a presence amidst the wreckage. He turned sharply as a familiar voice called his name, a sudden movement catching his eye from the periphery. The high elf stood there, vibrant and very much alive, a wide grin on her face as she explained that she had felt his awakening and rushed to his side as fast as her wings could carry her. He could hardly believe his eyes, stammering in shock at her sudden reappearance. Their reunion was interrupted by another arrival, as the silver-haired woman who had been by his side called out to him, drawing the elf's startled attention. She approached with a humble apology for the chaos she had caused, leaving the young man bewildered by her sudden change in demeanor, while the elf sensed a familiar, dark energy radiating from her. Sensing the danger, the elf lunged forward with a warning, identifying the woman as a demon. But the silver-haired lady merely looked on with an expression of mild confusion. The tension broke in an unexpected way when the elf suddenly staggered, her stomach growling loudly as she admitted to being completely famished. She realized then that her dramatic entrance had drained the last of her mana, a fact confirmed by the silver-haired woman, who revealed that they had been comrades 5 centuries ago. To settle the growing hunger, the silver-haired woman offered to prepare a meal, prompting the elf to boast about her own culinary skills, learned from her mother. She walks alongside her companions as the high elf enthusiastically proposes a plan to replenish their depleted mana, hunting a dragon for steak. The idea is met with immediate, hungry approval from the group as they envision a hearty meal. While they travel, the elf turns to the young man with a blunt question, asking if the ethereal woman beside them is his wife. The inquiry catches him completely off guard, his face contorting in shock at the sudden assumption. He frantically waves his hands in denial, stammering that such a thing is impossible since they had actually killed each other in their previous encounter. The elf simply nods, dismissing his frantic explanation as a mere cover story for their true relationship. Seeing his distress, she expresses concern that her presence has made him uncomfortable or wary. He quickly reassures her, suggesting that open communication will eventually lead to a better understanding between them, despite the awkwardness of the situation. Curious about her old comrade's current nature, the elf asks him to describe what kind of person the mage truly is in this new life. She begins to reminisce, recalling that in their past life, the mage was unparalleled in power, standing out as a truly exceptional figure even among the high elves, with no one able to match her magical prowess. Her memories paint a picture of a woman who was not only powerful, but also the heart of their group. A bright, kind soul who served as the mood maker and constantly looked out for the well-being of her friends. Their conversation is abruptly cut short as a massive earth dragon, a formidable A-rank monster, towers over them with a menacing roar. The group immediately shifts into a combat stance, acknowledging the arrival of their intended prey. Stepping forward, she insists on handling the beast herself, urging the young man to stay back. He agrees, determined to end the encounter quickly so they can finally head home for their meal. She draws her colossal blade with practiced ease, telling her companions to rest while she deals with the threat. The sheer scale and presence of the weapon leave the young man in awe as she prepares to strike. She moves with a speed that defies the eye, a blur of motion against the lumbering mass of the earth dragon. Kenya watches from the sidelines, his breath catching as he realizes he had vastly underestimated her agility. Determined to end the encounter quickly, she readies her blade, noting that her skills remain sharp despite the passage of 5 centuries. With a focused cry of desperado, she prepares to deliver a decisive strike. Standing her ground on the parched, cracked earth, she faces the towering beast, her small frame a stark contrast to its monstrous scale. In a flash of lethal precision, the dragon is overcome, its massive form silhouetted against the light as she completes her maneuver. The sheer power of the display leaves Kenya reeling. He struggled to even track the movement, wondering if such a feat was achieved through magic alone. Sensing the danger has passed, she casually suggests they make their way back. As the adrenaline fades, the scene shifts to a quiet, secluded cabin nestled among the trees, where the silence is broken only by the soft stirring of someone returning to consciousness. He blinks his eyes, open to find Lapis leaning over him, her expression one of gentle relief as she confirms he is finally awake. Looking around the modest interior, he questions their location, only for her, and to explain that they have arrived at her humble forest dwelling. His confusion deepens when he notices Lapis's presence in the small home, prompting and to matter-of-factly reveal the other woman's demonic nature. The revelation that she is the daughter of the Demon King sends a jolt through him, especially as he begins to sense a familiar, powerful mana emanating from her that mirrors the Dark Lord himself. She stood by as Kenya stepped between them, his hands raised in a placating gesture to soothe the tension radiating from Lapis. He assured the agitated woman that their host meant no harm, questioning if she was under some form of mental duress or external control. The hostility vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a warm, domestic smile as she announced that a meal would be prepared shortly. Kenya and the young demon princess watched from the doorway, the sudden shift in atmosphere leaving them momentarily stunned by her hospitality. She was caught off guard when he spoke with a quiet intensity, expressing a sincere desire to aid her in return for the kindness she had once shown him. The simple declaration hung in the air, causing her to pause in surprise at his unwavering loyalty. He pressed further, his gaze steady as he asked the question that had been weighing on his mind. Was she truly the one responsible for his reincarnation into this era? Her expression softened into one of somber admission as she recalled the moment of his passing, confessing that the thought of losing him was unbearable. Despite the forbidden nature of the act, she had reached out with ancient magic to pull his soul back from the brink of death. The price for such a miracle was steep, leaving her unable to weave magic for a full century, a time she spent wandering the world as a mere observer. She watched as the memory of the Great War faded, and the divide between humans and demons remained an unhealed scar across the land. To ensure his legacy was not forgotten, she had transformed the records of his past struggles into legends, spreading them across the lands to keep the hope of a hero alive. It was a selfish act, she admitted, born from certainty that only he could change the course of history. He listened intently, the weight of her words sinking in as he realized that for this world to truly find peace, the presence of a hero was not just a story, but a necessity. However, he countered with a grim truth, stating that a hero alone would never be enough to bridge the chasm between their peoples. Lapis looked on, startled by the resolve in his voice as he challenged the very foundation of the legend she had built. Looking back on the centuries of conflict, he recalled the alliances made with those demons who sought a peaceful coexistence. Yet despite their shared efforts, that dream had remained out of reach. He clenched his fist, the memory of a world that could have been fueling a new, quiet determination. He listens as Lapis hums while preparing a meal, her thoughts turning to the princess. She notes that despite being the Demon King's daughter, the girl seeks genuine friendship with humanity and is working tirelessly to bridge the gap between their peoples. Hearing this, he expresses a newfound hope, believing that with her help, a peaceful world where humans and demons coexist is finally within reach. The princess, overhearing his sincere words, is visibly moved by his unwavering faith in her. The moment of reflection is interrupted when Lapis announces that dinner is ready. Both he and the princess quickly respond, eager to join her at the table. They are greeted by a lavish spread of various dishes that look absolutely mouth-watering. He is stunned by the variety and asks the princess if she was truly the one who prepared such an incredible feast. She proudly confirms that she poured her heart into every single dish, encouraging them to eat their fill. As they take their first bites, the effort she put into the meal becomes immediately apparent. The princess herself seems overwhelmed by the flavors, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and delight as she experiences the results of her own culinary labor. He cannot help but praise her, declaring every dish to be fantastic and truly delicious. His genuine compliment brings a bright, happy blush to her face as they continue their meal together. During the conversation, he turns to Lapis with a lingering question, asking why she chose to seal herself away for so long. She looks away, her cheeks tinged with pink, and softly admits that a world without him was simply too lonely to endure. While he remains somewhat oblivious to the weight of that confession, the princess huffs in frustration, chiding him for his complete lack of understanding when it comes to a maiden's heart. He can only look on in confusion, unsure of what he said wrong. Lapis watches the two of them with a knowing smile, remarking on how close they have already become. Amidst the light-hearted atmosphere, the princess turns to the mage, tentatively asking if she might call her by her name, Angelica. She beamed with gratitude, thanking her host for the incredible meal they had just shared. Lapis accepted the praise with a gentle smile, assuring her guest that she was more than welcome. Despite the warm atmosphere, the young warrior felt a lingering guilt, bowing her head as she apologized for her previous rudeness. Lapis quickly waved off the concern, insisting that she thought nothing of it. Watching the girl's earnest display, the ancient being felt a swell of affection, wishing she had encountered such a kind soul 5 centuries earlier. She noted that with their current allies, including the mage Angelica, their goals might finally be within reach. Kenya met her gaze, confirming with quiet intensity that he meant every word of his earlier promise. He extended a hand toward her, declaring her a vital comrade and formally inviting her to join their quest for justice, seeking to settle the scores left open 500 years ago. The suggestion was met with immediate, enthusiastic approval from the young princess, while Lapis stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound emotion. Overwhelmed by the gesture, she offered her heartfelt thanks, reflecting on how their failure in the distant past had been the very catalyst for their current path. In response to his invitation, she reached out, presenting a simple ring held delicately in her palm as a token of her commitment. The sight of the jewelry caused the princess to hesitate, questioning if it was right to accept such a precious heirloom from Lapis's mother. Lapis merely smiled, explaining that the gift served as a symbol of their shared ideals. She looked at him with newfound resolve, expressing her genuine joy that he had asked for her strength to aid him in the battles to come. She watched as the mage proposed a practical solution, suggesting they create a magical duplicate of the heirloom so the original could remain safe. The demoness agreed, her gaze softening as she acknowledged the wisdom in the plan. Turning her attention to the young hero, she shared a quiet moment of understanding, her resolve firming as the group solidified their bond. With their spirits high, the companions brought their hands together in a unified pact, vowing to begin their journey the following day by assisting those in the immediate vicinity. The next morning found them in the thick of a rank E quest, facing down a massive, undulating giant slime. The princess charged forward with infectious enthusiasm, while her companion drew her blade, ready to strike. Their coordination was flawless. As the creature was suddenly encased in ice, the young man watched from the sidelines, impressed by how perfectly the two women complemented each other's strengths. As they traveled onward, he found himself lost in thought, acknowledging the difficulty of their path while secretly wishing for the presence of an old friend. In the distance, the rhythmic clatter of wheels signaled an approaching vehicle. His reflections were cut short when an ornate royal carriage pulled to a halt directly in his path, its sudden appearance catching him completely off guard. Stunned, he watched as the door began to swing open, the realization of who might be inside, causing his eyes to widen in disbelief. Inside the cabin, the noblewoman pondered the weight of recent events, considering the improbable timing of a hero's rise and the awakening of a great sage alongside rumors of a new demon king. When the door finally opened, the young man's shock turned to frantic confusion as he demanded an explanation for the startling claim regarding a new sovereign of the demon realm. Kenya enters a room and is shocked to see a familiar face. Teresa, he gasps. She looks back, her eyes wide with disbelief, calling out to her big bro. The reunion is far from peaceful. She immediately begins berating him, her face flushed with anger as she reminds him that he left to be an adventurer and didn't send a single letter in 3 long years. He can only offer a sheepish apology, realizing the weight of the worry he caused her. Her anger quickly melts into relief. Wiping a tear from her eye, she admits that despite her frustration, she is simply grateful to see him alive. He watches her, his expression softening at her vulnerability. He offers a sincere apology for the pain he caused. As they stand together, she senses something fundamentally different about him. His presence feels more intense, as if he is overflowing with a power he didn't possess 3 years ago. She then reveals the reason for her presence, explaining that she has risen to the rank of vice captain of the Royal Knights. Standing before a line of armored soldiers, she questions why he is there, while he stares in awe at her new status. The conversation shifts to grave matters concerning the kingdom. She explains that one of the 2 holy swords, Arclight, mysteriously vanished from the royal castle, coinciding with legends of a hero's return after 5 centuries. Because of these events, she had been sent to investigate reports of an adventurer named Renya who was seen wielding a golden sword. She admits she didn't want to believe it was him, but the evidence was mounting. Suddenly, the air is sliced by a dark, malevolent force. A shadowy projectile hurtles toward her, catching her completely off guard as she realizes she let her defenses down. Before the strike can land, he moves with blinding speed. Stepping in front of her, he effortlessly deflects the dark energy with a single, powerful motion, his eyes fixed on the source of the threat. She stares at his back, a realization dawning on her. The memories of his incredible strength weren't just dreams. Her brother truly has become someone extraordinary. Years ago, a 5-year-old Teresa sprinted through the dense woods, her heart heavy with a child's fleeting spite as she declared her indifference toward her mother. Her pace slowed as the familiar trails vanished, replaced by an alien thicket that she didn't recognize from her usual games. She came to a halt, her eyes wide with a growing realization of her isolation as she whispered a question to the silent trees. The silence was shattered by the heavy tread of a red bear, its massive form looming over her from the shadows of the forest. As the B-rank beast let out a deafening roar, she froze, her mind racing with the terrifying knowledge that such a creature should never be this close to the safety of town. Just as the monster prepared to strike, her brother leaped into the fray, positioning his small frame as a shield between her and certain death. He gritted his teeth against the fear, his hand moving with a sudden, desperate instinct to defend what he held dear. Despite the visible pain etched on his face and the wound he had already sustained, he immediately turned his concern toward her, checking for her safety. The boy stood his ground, his presence feeling entirely different to his sister as he warned the beast to stay away. In a blinding flash of golden light, he became the hero of her dreams, though the memory of his incredible feat would vanish from his mind as soon as the danger passed. He looks on in silence as the realization finally dawns on his childhood friend. She looks down, her voice trembling as she admits she always suspected he was the true hero. Because of this shared history, she offers a tearful apology for her long absence and for the state in which he found her, feeling unworthy of his gaze. In response, the young man tries to find the right words, stammering that he wasn't intentionally keeping secrets, but that the nature of his power is a complicated tale he has yet to fully grasp himself. Their private moment is interrupted by the arrival of a regal figure, whose presence causes the knight to bow in frantic apology. The newcomer, a woman of striking elegance, speaks of the legendary golden blade with an air of certainty. She steps forward, her gaze fixed on him with unwavering conviction, declaring that the manifestation of the golden holy sword leaves no room for doubt regarding his identity. Identifying herself as Princess Charlotte of the Fozilia Kingdom, she extends a formal invitation from the king himself, requesting his presence at the royal castle. The weight of the request leaves him momentarily speechless. To ease the tension, she clarifies that the invitation extends to his entire party, promising a grand banquet to celebrate the emergence of a new savior. As the offer hangs in the air, the demon princess considers the implications for their group, her expression clouded with caution as she weighs the risks of entering the human capital. The swordsman, sensing the gravity of the situation, expresses his gratitude, but insists on consulting his friends before making such a monumental decision. Understanding his loyalty, the princess and the knight assure him that the gates of the kingdom will remain open, waiting for whenever they are ready to step into their new roles. She stands before the group, her presence commanding attention as Kenya and in exchange confused glances. And, her brow furrowed, demands to know the subject of their hushed conversation, while Kenya's eyes widen at the mention of Lapis. Turning her gaze toward the spirited girl with the high ponytail, the princess questions if she could possibly be the legendary figure they seek. The revelation that it might be the great sage leaves both the young man and the elf-eared warrior in a state of stunned silence. To support her claim, she gestures toward the striking resemblance between the girl and a historical portrait housed within the royal castle. The likeness is uncanny, suggesting a lineage or a destiny far greater than any of them had imagined. Sensing the weight of the situation, the warrior asks for confirmation of the noblewoman's identity. With a graceful nod, the visitor formally introduces herself as Charlotte, confirming her status as royalty of the Fozilia Kingdom. She then recounts the ancient lore passed down through generations, telling of a great sage who had entered a deep, magical slumber. The princess believes that this long-awaited awakening has finally come to pass in their presence. Connecting the threads of fate, she muses that the simultaneous emergence of a new hero and the return of the sage cannot be mere chance. Her expression turns grave as she mentions the unsettling rumors of a new demon king rising in the shadows. This last remark causes the young man to recoil, a sharp jolt of alarm flashing across his face. The mention of a demonic sovereign clearly strikes a chord of deep-seated concern within him. He demands clarification, his voice rising with an intensity that startles the princess. The idea of a new demon king seems to weigh heavily on his mind, prompting a sudden, urgent need for more information. As he processes the news, he considers the growing chaos across the land, where monsters are becoming increasingly violent. The desecration of the evil god's temple appears to be the catalyst for this surge in demonic activity, a fact that even the royal knights are struggling to contain. Recognizing the gravity of the threat, he steps forward and offers his party's assistance to the beleaguered kingdom. The princess admits that their resources are stretched thin, making his unexpected proposal a welcome glimmer of hope in uncertain times. He ponders the weight of the news regarding a new demon king, his thoughts drifting to Sophia and how much her presence would be needed in such uncertain times. The princess then reveals a startling truth. Lady Sophia is currently in a deep slumber within the grand cathedral of the Holy Church Nation, mirroring the legendary state of the great sage. Stunned by the revelation, he asks for confirmation of her survival, while realizes with a start that Angelica had been keeping this vital information a secret from the rest of the group. Anne's frustration boils over as she laments her lost opportunity for private time with him, feeling as though she's constantly being outmaneuvered by Angelica's foresight. She groans about the ever-growing list of rivals for his attention, leaving him to simply sigh in exasperation at the mounting interpersonal drama within their party. Turning back to the matter at hand, he requests the specific location of the cathedral, a request the princess is more than happy to grant to help them on their way. He then asks for a brief delay, promising that the entire party will present themselves at the castle once they have successfully reunited with their missing companion. Soon after, the group arrives at the holy capital, where the very air seems to hum with a sacred, tranquil energy that sets it apart from any other city. The city stretches out before them, a bastion of order and faith characterized by its clean streets and imposing stone architecture. Concerned for his companion, he asks, and if the holy atmosphere of the city affects her demonic nature, but she reassures him that she feels no discomfort at all. He walks alongside his companions as Princess Charlotte offers a warm endorsement of Angelica's character, expressing her full confidence in the mage's goodness and reliability. As they continue through the bustling city, his eyes are drawn to a towering monument in the center of the plaza, a grand statue of Sophia, standing as a beacon of hope for the citizens. Observing the townspeople gathered in prayer, and remarks on the incredible depth of their devotion, noting how Sophia became a revered figure of admiration following the climactic struggle against the Demon King. The group soon reaches their destination, standing before the imposing facade of the grand cathedral that Charlotte had described as their goal. Stepping into the vast, hallowed interior, the young hero acknowledges that the princess's influence allowed them to enter without delay, his gaze immediately locking onto a transparent coffin resting at the far end of the hall. A sudden jolt of realization strikes him as he draws closer, his breath catching in his throat at the sight of what lies within the glass. There, resting in a peaceful, eternal slumber, is Sophia herself, her presence finally confirmed before his very eyes. He stands over the transparent coffin, his eyes wide with disbelief as he gazes upon the sleeping figure. He questions if this woman, appearing far more mature than the girl he once knew, could truly be the saint he sought. Beside him, the princess and the warrior confirm his suspicions, and remarks on how much Sophia has grown, noting her striking beauty, while Charlotte simply nods in solemn agreement, acknowledging the passage of time that has changed their friend. He turns his gaze back to the seal, his expression hardening with resolve, and encourages him, reminding him that his blade, Arclight, possesses the unique power required to shatter the magical barrier holding the saint in her long stasis. Taking a deep breath, he tightens his grip on the hilt of his sword. He reaches out toward the shimmering geometric patterns of the seal, the air humming with latent energy as his hand nears the boundary. With a swift, decisive motion, he draws the blade, whispering a soft apology to the sleeping woman for the long years she spent in isolation while he was away. The moment the steel connects with the barrier, a blinding radiance erupts, filling the chamber with a pure, white light that dissolves the ancient magic into shimmering dust. As the light fades, the woman within the coffin stirs, her long eyelashes fluttering before her eyes slowly open to reveal a gaze filled with dazed confusion and the first sparks of returning consciousness. She focuses on the young man standing before her voice a mere whisper as she speaks his name. He offers a warm, gentle smile, telling her simply that he has finally returned home, a statement that brings tears of overwhelming relief to her eyes. Overwhelmed by emotion, she surges forward, throwing her arms around him in a desperate embrace. The suddenness of her movement and her lack of attire catch the others off guard, their faces flushing as they witness the raw intensity of the reunion. She clings to him with surprising strength, her grip so tight it draws a pained cry from him. Behind them, his companions watch the scene with a mix of shock and awkwardness, realizing the depth of the bond they are witnessing. She clings to him with such overwhelming force that his defensive skills fail to activate, leaving him gasping for air. Realizing the unintended strength of her embrace, she quickly pulls back, offering a flustered and tearful apology for her lack of restraint. They are observed from a distance by Lapis and Anne, who watch the emotional display with mixed feelings. Lapis notes that the saint awoke even earlier than she did, while Anne observes that Sophia's singular focus on Kenya has only intensified during her long slumber, a stark change from the woman she once knew. Their reunion remains intense as he tries to soothe her frantic energy, though the sheer power she radiates leaves and in a state of utter disbelief. Sophia, overwhelmed by the reality of his presence, can do little more than bow her head and continue to apologize for her outburst. He notices how much she has changed, remarking that she has truly matured into an adult worthy of her holy title. She explains that after the Demon King was defeated, she dedicated herself to rigorous training and eventually attained the rank of Great Saint, using her newfound power to seal herself away until the moment of his promised return. They find a brief moment of peace in each other's company, with her beaming at the joy of their meeting. He reciprocates the warmth, expressing his own relief and happiness that they have finally been reunited after so long. This tranquility is broken when Sestina senses a sudden, sharp shift in the mana surrounding them. Sophia's warm expression vanishes instantly, replaced by a cold, murderous glare as she senses the demonic presence nearby and prepares to act. She strikes without hesitation, lunging forward with a speed that defies the eye. He shouts for her to stop, but her focus is locked entirely on the demon girl, her intent clear as she closes the distance in a blur of motion. Her sudden outburst releases a shockwave of holy power that pushes him back, leaving him struggling to understand the sudden violence. She demands that he step aside, her eyes burning with righteous fury as she points directly at Sestina, identifying her as the Demon King. He attempts to reason with her, insisting that there is a justification for the demon's presence, but she remains steadfast. She declares that her eyes cannot be deceived, regardless of the form the Demon King has taken, and she refuses to lower her guard. She concludes that he must be under some form of mental manipulation, her suspicion hardening as she analyzes the situation. With a grim resolve, she prepares to eliminate the threat, believing it is the only way to save her friend from the demon's control. She listens as and approaches her with a sympathetic expression, and admits that she initially shared the saint's suspicions, but her perspective has since shifted through their shared journey. The energetic girl continues her plea, gesturing to herself as she questions if Sophia truly believes a great sage of her caliber could be so easily manipulated or possessed by demonic influence. Faced with this logic, the saint closes her eyes in deep contemplation. She eventually relents, choosing to trust the words of her companions for the time being, though a shadow of doubt remains in her heart. Her gaze then shifts toward the demon princess standing nearby. Despite her concession to the group, she confesses that she still finds it impossible to place any personal trust in the daughter of the Demon King. The demon princess meets this cold admission with a resolute expression of her own. She accepts the saint's distrust without protest, acknowledging that the atrocities committed by her father are indeed unforgivable and a burden she must carry. As a heavy silence falls between the two women, and claps her hands together sharply to break the tension. The saint watches as the group prepares to move past the immediate conflict and focus on the road ahead. The young hero steps forward to mediate, suggesting they set aside their differences for the moment. He recognizes that their shared path requires a temporary truce if they are to succeed in their mission. He goes on to remind them of the looming shadow over the world. With the potential birth of a new Demon King, their original mission has become more critical than ever, and they cannot afford internal strife. With a welcoming gesture, he extends an invitation to the saint. He asks her directly to join their cause and travel alongside them, emphasizing how much he values her assistance in the trials to come. A soft, genuine smile finally touches her lips as she looks at him. She agrees without hesitation, revealing that her very reason for entering her long slumber was the hope of one day reuniting with him and standing by his side once more. She stands with a clenched fist, her eyes burning with a fierce resolve as she declares her absolute commitment to preventing the rise of a new Demon King, a vow that echoes with the weight of her duty. Noticing a change in her presence, the young man points out that she seems to have grown remarkably strong, though he observes that this power feels more like raw physical prowess than the magical mana he expected from Saint. This unexpected praise causes a deep crimson flush to creep across her cheeks, her expression softening into one of bashful surprise. Her mind drifts back to the moment he shielded her, a memory of protection that clearly still carries significant weight in her heart. She is met with a quick dismissal as the warrior insists that she shouldn't have had to die and that the outcome was his own responsibility, while she remains convinced that greater strength on her part would have changed their fate. She begins to explain the source of her newfound vigor, recounting how a chance encounter with a certain martial artist led her down a path of rigorous discipline to overcome her perceived weaknesses. The training she endured was grueling beyond words, involving thousands of repetitions of strikes and kicks that push her body to its absolute limits. As she continues to count her repetitions, even now, reaching into the hundreds, he can only stare in disbelief, nursing a slight headache as he wonders just what kind of person could have put a saint through such an ordeal. Her counting is interrupted by a sudden announcement echoing through the grand hall, proclaiming to all present that the saint has finally awakened. She is approached by an elderly man in ornate clerical robes who introduces himself as Johann, the archbishop of the church, and expresses his profound honor at finally meeting her. The group stands within the grand hall of the cathedral when a massive tremor suddenly shakes the entire structure, the sound of shifting stone reverberating through the air. He and the others are jolted by the sudden shock, their faces etched with confusion and alarm as they demand an explanation for the violent disturbance. The archbishop reveals a grim truth. A powerful demon, known as a vampire, has been sealed beneath their feet for generations, and they have arrived too late to prevent its stirring. The young hero can hardly believe his ears, the mention of a demon sending a chill through him as he repeats the word in disbelief, his eyes wide with shock. Johann clarifies that the recent tremor was the direct result of the vampire's awakening, while and stands by, her expression darkening with the weight of the threat. Kenya questions why such a monster was ever sealed in this sacred place to begin with, seeking answers as the saint listens in silence to the unfolding revelation. The archbishop recounts the history, explaining that in the chaos following the Demon King's fall, this vampire descended upon their lands and wrought havoc. He describes how their ancestors struggled to repel the beast, but without the saint's power to guide them, they were unable to strike it down for good. Left with no other choice, the ancient priests combined their strength to bind the vampire within the cathedral's foundations, sealing it away from the world. Kenya takes in the gravity of the situation, his mind racing as the Archbishop offers a humble apology for the secrecy of their actions and for acting on his own. He listens as the saint takes the burden upon herself, her voice heavy with regret as she insists that the failure to contain the threat was hers alone. While she dwells on her past choices, their companion tries to break the tension, confidently asserting that a single vampire will be no match for their combined strength. However, her confidence wavers instantly when she learns the true scale of the threat. 20 vampires were sealed away, not just one. The sheer number of powerful foes makes the task ahead seem far more daunting than she initially imagined. Looking out over the city as the sun dips toward the horizon, the Archbishop notes that they have barely an hour before the light fades completely. He finds small comfort in the fact that the creatures are currently hindered by the daylight, but that advantage is rapidly vanishing. Sensing the saint's lingering guilt, the young hero turns to her with a reassuring gaze, reminding her that they are a team and she does not need to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. He offers a confident smile and a thumbs up, proposing that they divide the burden of the 20 foes equally among the 4 of them. With the plans set and the deadline of sunset looming, the group prepares for the hunt, their resolve hardened by the necessity of defeating the 20 enemies before the darkness gives the vampires their full strength. Suddenly, before another word can be said, the energetic warrior bolts toward the exit, leaving the others startled by her impulsive head start. Seeing her disappear, the young leader rallies the remaining members, urging them to move out and begin the operation before any more time is lost. Meanwhile, high above the city streets, a figure with predatory eyes and sharp fangs gazes down at the unsuspecting populace. Having been imprisoned for centuries, the ancient creature relishes his newfound freedom, his mind consumed by a singular, ravenous desire for the taste of human blood. The city of Fozilia lay quiet under the afternoon sun, but a hidden threat lurked within its walls. Approximately 20 vampires had escaped their confinement, and the task of neutralizing them before nightfall was paramount. Standing amidst the urban sprawl, the young hero coordinated with his companions and Sestina. He directed their focus toward the narrow alleyways where the creatures would likely seek refuge from the light, his mind already racing back to a peculiar magical signature he had sensed previously. Closing his eyes to sharpen his focus, he activated his mana detection, projecting a mental map of the surrounding structures. The grid of the city unfolded in his mind's eye, searching for the telltale ripples of supernatural energy. The search bore fruit almost immediately, revealing 4 distinct signatures nearby. One pulsed with significant power, while 3 others were noticeably fainter, pinpointing the exact location of their core. A piercing scream suddenly shattered the silence, prompting him to sprint toward the source of the distress. He rounded a corner, his heart hammering against his ribs as the urgency of the situation escalated. Upon reaching the scene, he found a monstrous vampire looming over a terrified woman, its claws digging into her shoulders. The sight of the predator in the act of abduction forced a sharp curse from his lips. As he assessed the group, a wave of confusion washed over him. While the central figure was undeniably a vampire, the others surrounding it appeared to be ordinary humans, standing in a dazed, compliant state. He scrutinized the women, noting their vacant expressions and the strange resonance of their energy. Though they looked human, the mana emanating from them carried the distinct, foul taint of a demon. The grim reality of the situation became clear. They were victims of thrallification. A vampire's bite did more than just drain a victim's life force. It bound their will to the master, turning them into mindless servants. This process was merely the first stage of a horrific transformation, as those held in thrall would eventually succumb and become vampires themselves. Realizing the potential for an exponential increase in their enemies' numbers, he knew he had to act immediately to prevent the city from being overrun. He realizes that if the thrallification is a recent occurrence, striking down the source of the curse might be the only way to save the innocent people caught in its web. The vampire before him sneers, confident in its dark power and the hold it has over its new servants. The young swordsman wastes no more time on contemplation, drawing his blade as it begins to hum with a brilliant, surging light. He declares his intent to unleash his full strength, knowing that every second counts if he is to undo the damage already done. Elsewhere, the princess stands her ground against a hulking, winged monstrosity that towers over her. She taunts the beast, remarking on its brutish size and questioning if it is truly a vampire or merely a common orc, all while a small, concentrated spark of fire dances on her fingertip. Because her mana has sufficiently replenished, she doesn't hold back, erupting into a colossal pillar of flame that consumes the alleyway. The massive creature can only let out a final, agonized cry as the Megiddo flame incinerates its form, leaving it eager to finish the job and return to her friends. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the Saint Sophia stands amidst the fallen bodies of those she has subdued, her expression calm and resolute. She notes that her sector is secure for the moment, but her work is far from finished. To ensure the safety of her companions, she closes her eyes and initiates a wide-range mana detection spell, her mind reaching out across the urban sprawl to track every magical signature. Through this mystical sight, she confirms that Kenya and Lapis are holding their own, their signatures steady and strong amidst the chaos. However, Her focus is suddenly shattered by a jarring, discordant ripple in the magical ether that catches her completely off guard. She recognizes the familiar aura of the demon princess, but it is overshadowed by a secondary, malevolent presence that chills her to the bone. Something is deeply wrong, a darkness she hadn't anticipated lurking so close to her friend. At that very moment, a pale, aristocratic figure with pointed ears and a mocking gaze manifests before Sestina. He identifies himself as Argan, the undead vampire lord, explaining that he was drawn to the scene by a familiar presence released from a seal. Sestina can only stare in shock, whispering his name as the realization of his arrival sinks in. He stands with arms wide, a mocking elegance in his posture as he greets the demon princess by her true name, Angelica. He expresses a feigned joy at her awakening, surprised that she still remembers a lowly aide like himself. Sestina, however, remains guarded, noting that he was once a close subordinate to the 4 heavenly lords of the Demon King's army. Continuing his appraisal, he notes that she has changed significantly since their last meeting, suggesting she possessed more charm in the past. Sestina listens in silence, her expression hardening as she senses the malice beneath his polite veneer. With a sinister glint in his eyes, he remarks on the chaotic events that unfolded following the collapse of the Demon King's forces. He speaks of the passage of time with a cold detachment, hinting at the many shifts in power that occurred while she slept. From the shadows of a nearby building, Sophia watches the exchange with growing dread. She is stunned to realize that the girl she had been tracking is not only acquainted with such a powerful demon, but seems to share a history with him. The tense standoff is suddenly shattered by the terrified cry of a local worker who stumbles upon the scene. As the man screams in horror at the sight of the vampire, Sophia realizes the situation has spiraled out of control, while Argan's irritation begins to flare. Without a moment's hesitation, the vampire lord lashes out with a lethal wave of energy, seeking to silence the interruption. He dismissively tells the man to keep quiet, unwilling to let a mere human disrupt what he considers a heartfelt reunion. Before the strike can connect, Sestina throws herself in front of the terrified man, taking the brunt of the magical assault. The sudden act of selflessness leaves both Sophia and Argan momentarily speechless as the impact echoes through the street. He stares at his hands in disbelief, his composure finally cracking as he tries to process what he just witnessed. The idea that the daughter of the Demon King would risk her life to shield a human is a concept he finds utterly incomprehensible. Ignoring the vampire's confusion, she turns her attention to the trembling man behind her, urgently asking if he is unharmed. The worker can only stare up at her in awe, stammering out his realization that she has just saved his life. His face contorts with a mixture of disgust and realization as he recalls the ancient rumors of her sympathies toward humanity. Sestina stands her ground, her voice firm as she commands him to stop, declaring that this senseless conflict with humans will lead to nothing but further ruin. He scoffs at her idealism, dismissing the notion of coexisting with humanity as utter nonsense. While she pleads for a world where demons and humans join hands, he insists that the only path forward is the total eradication of the human race to secure a world solely for their kind. Clenching his clawed hand, he declares that he finally possesses the strength to turn his genocidal vision into a reality. He reveals that his original intent was to make her his queen once she awakened, but her perceived weakness has forced him to reconsider his plans for the throne. With a snarl of contempt, the vampire lord lunges, branding her a spineless weakling who has no place in the new world he intends to build. Seeing the impending strike, she desperately urges the human witness to flee for his life. The blow connects with devastating force, sending her crashing through the stone walls of a nearby building in a cloud of dust and debris. Watching the brutal display from her vantage point, the saint is struck by a profound confusion, wondering why the daughter of the Demon King would risk everything to shield a mere human. He looms over the wreckage, his voice dripping with malice as he suggests that her incompetence was likely the true cause of her father's demise. The accusation cuts deep, forcing her to confront the crushing guilt she has carried since that day, remembering how she stood by helplessly while her father fell. As the weight of her past threatens to overwhelm her, the young hero stands firm, his gaze fixed on the horizon as he vows to never again lose those he holds dear. He and his companions remained the anchor for Sestina's resolve as she looked upon the faces of those she had come to cherish. The saint, the warrior princess, the mage, and the knight. Turning back to the cold-eyed vampire, she pleaded for an end to the violence, suggesting a future where their kind could find a different way. Deep down, she remembered the sting of her own past weakness and the vow she had made never to let it consume her again. The vampire lord merely sighed, his patience exhausted. With a chilling command for her to perish, he summoned a swirling vortex of dark energy. The blast erupted with a deafening roar, but before it could strike, a brilliant flash of light intercepted the darkness, shattering the lethal spell into harmless sparks. Both the princess and her assailant froze in disbelief as the source of the intervention became clear, leaving them both breathless. The great saint's voice echoed with a calm authority, reminding the young demon that even her father had fought with everything he possessed. She challenged the girl, pointing out that mere wishes are hollow without the strength to enforce them. questioning if her current resolve was truly enough to protect her dreams. In that moment, the princess realized she had been leaning on the strength of her friends rather than finding her own. Her desire for a world where humans and demons could coexist was no longer just a fleeting hope. It had become her singular, driving purpose. With a newfound clarity, she offered her thanks to the saint. The hesitation that had clouded her eyes vanished, replaced by a fierce determination to forge ahead. She turned her gaze back to Argan, her voice ringing out with a warning. Kin or not, she made it clear that anyone who stood against her path would be met with steel. Drawing her blade, she stood bathed in a radiant aura, ready to face him with every ounce of her being. The vampire lord's lips curled into a predatory grin, finally seeing the spark of a true adversary. She stands resolute on the cobblestone street, her gaze fixed on the winged figure looming above. Argan scoffs at her display of power, his voice dripping with condescension as he declares that no amount of strength can bridge the gap between them. Undeterred, she voices her final decision, proclaiming that his death will serve as the ultimate offering for her to claim the title of the new Demon King. They charge forward together, their resolve hardening under the weight of the vampire lord's piercing, narrowed gaze. Beside her, Sophia raises her fists in a combat stance, matching her determination. With a fierce battle cry, the two women lunge toward their adversary, ready to put their lives on the line. Argan descends from the sky, his dark form silhouetted against the light as he crashes into the stone courtyard. Sestina and Sophia brace themselves against the shockwave of his land. He clicks his tongue in irritation, his boots crunching on the shattered pavement as he regains his footing. Despite the suddenness of the counterattack, he remains poised, his eyes narrowing at the two women standing before him. Standing within the center of a fresh crater, the vampire lord admits to himself that he had momentarily underestimated his opponents. The vast, empty courtyard emphasizes the isolation of their struggle as the tension thickens. Nearby, Sophia watches him warily, her mind racing to understand the nature of the strike that had just pushed him back. She realizes that Sestina's power isn't conventional magic, but a terrifying ability capable of severing the very fabric of space. She remains resolute as Sestina warns their foe that any further attempts will be futile. Argan merely sneers at the defiance, and in a blur of motion that defies the eye, he launches himself forward, leaving Sestina gasping at his sheer, unnatural speed. The vampire lunges with lethal intent, but Sophia moves instinctively to intercept him, her presence a shield for the demon princess. This unexpected intervention causes him to falter, his voice dripping with confusion as he demands to know why a saintess of the church would ever protect the offspring of the Demon King. She does not waver, her gaze fixed on him as she declares that Sestina is no longer an enemy, but a vital ally in the coming conflict. He responds with a hollow, mocking laugh that echoes through the courtyard, his face contorting with pure, unadulterated arrogance. To him, the notion of an alliance between their kinds is a joke, as he views all of humanity as nothing more than cattle to be harvested. They stand their ground together, a united front against his growing bloodlust. Undeterred, he vows to drain every last drop of their life force to bolster his own dark powers. The monster revels in his own cruelty, boasting of the hundreds of human lives he has snuffed out and consumed in the power vacuum left by the Demon King's demise. His claws flex, eager to add their blood to his long history of slaughter. He is exerting a pressure Sestina hasn't felt in centuries. She realizes that his strength has evolved to a level far beyond what it was during the era of the Demon King. The vampire lord laughs, expressing a twisted gratitude for the Demon King's demise. He admits that the king's presence had stifled him, but now he is free to savor the exquisite terror on human faces. Sestina glares at him, her resolve hardening against his cruelty. She hears the saintess call out her name, prompting a sharp look of surprise. Her companion, the spirited princess, and immediately voices her readiness to assist, responding with a determined nod. Amidst the tension, Sophia speaks with a calm authority, requesting just 60 seconds of protection. She needs a moment of absolute focus to prepare her counterattack, and steps forward, vowing to hold the line. The three women form a desperate front against the encroaching darkness, each prepared to play their part in the coming clash. He sneers at their coordination, dismissing their efforts as a futile strategy. As Sestina lunges, he dissolves into a wispy, intangible smoke, mocking her inability to strike a shadow. He maneuvers behind her, certain that this will be the end. Suddenly, the predator becomes the prey as a sharp impact halts his movement. His eyes widen in genuine shock as his ethereal form is forcibly anchored by an unseen force. She reveals that she had anticipated his predictable maneuver. By concentrating her spatial slashes on the air behind her, she caught him at the exact moment he had to solidify his form to deliver a finishing blow. With the vampire lord momentarily trapped, she declares that his reign of terror concludes here. Her gaze is cold, reflecting the centuries of history between their kinds. Seizing the opening, Sophia unleashes the full might of her sacred magnum. A blinding pillar of holy light erupts, engulfing the vampire in a purifying blast that shakes the very foundations of the street. She offers a sincere word of gratitude to Angelica, acknowledging the vital role her companion played in the recent struggle. Angelica returns the sentiment warmly, But it is Sestina who speaks with the most conviction, admitting that Sophia's unwavering presence gave her the strength to finally make up her mind. Turning her gaze toward the fading form of the vampire lord, she speaks with a heavy heart, lamenting the unfortunate path he chose. Despite the enmity between them, she vows never to forget him as one of her own kind, a somber acknowledgement of their shared heritage even in the face of his defeat. As the conversation lingers, the last sliver of the sun disappears behind the distant city skyline, plunging the world into twilight. The brief moment of peace is shattered by a chilling realization. The time they had bought has finally run out. The vampire lord suddenly surges with a terrifying new vitality, his wounds knitting together as he basks in the darkness. He declares with a predatory grin that the cursed sun has set, and from this moment on, the night belongs entirely to him, leaving the women frozen in shock. He unleashes a violent burst of kinetic energy, a physical manifestation of his restored power that catches them completely off guard. The force of the blow is immense, throwing both Sophia and Sestina backward as they struggle to maintain their footing against the sudden onslaught. A massive explosion of dust and debris erupts from the point of impact, obscuring the battlefield in a thick, gray haze. The sheer magnitude of the vampire's strength is undeniable, turning the tide of the encounter in a single, brutal instant. Standing tall amidst the settling dust, he looms over his fallen adversaries like a god of death, his dark wings unfurled. He mocks their efforts, marveling at his own immortality and hungrily eyeing the blood he intends to claim from them now that their resistance has been crushed. Lying prone on the ground, Angelica is gripped by a crushing sense of helplessness as she stares up at the monster. The bitter memory of past failures resurfaces, and she finds herself paralyzed by the terrifying thought that she is once again unable to do anything to save those she cares about. Just as the vampire prepares to strike, a blur of motion cuts through the air, and a heavy blade bites deep into his shoulder. Kenya has returned to the fray, his sudden intervention catching the arrogant immortal completely by surprise and forcing him to stagger back. He stands defiantly between the monster and his friends, a grim smile playing on his lips despite the dire situation. With a sharp, challenging look, he taunts the vampire lord, noting with satisfaction that he didn't quite manage to stay dead as expected. He looks down at the resting saint, a quiet apology escaping his lips for the burden she has carried while he was away. His expression hardens into one of fierce resolve as he vows that he will never allow her to suffer such sadness again, his eyes burning with a newfound protective fire. Because of this declaration, Sophia gazes at him in stunned silence, a realization dawning on her that he truly remembers their shared past and the bond they once held. While the two share this moment and rushes to the scene, her massive blade at the ready as she checks on the safety of the others and prepares to offer healing to the wounded. In response to the intrusion, the vampire lord narrows his eyes in confusion at the name being used, while the young hero commands his allies to stand back and let him handle the threat alone. As the tension peaks, the ancient creature finally recognizes the warrior before him as the legendary hero Renya, seeing this as the perfect opportunity to prove his superiority over even the Demon King by slaying a legend in this new era. Without another word, the swordsman lunges forward, his blade striking against the dense, swirling mass of dark energy that the vampire conjures to shield himself from the blow. He continues his relentless assault, his movements a blur of steel, yet each wound he manages to inflict on the monster's shadowy defense seems to vanish as quickly as it appears, leaving no lasting mark. The vampire laughs at the futility of the effort, mocking the hero's strength while the young man realizes with growing dread that the creature's regenerative powers are far beyond anything he anticipated, fueled by the darkness of the night. Seeing his struggle, his companions cry out in warning, explaining that Argan is truly immortal under the cover of night, and that only a concentrated burst of powerful light can hope to break his curse and end his reign of terror. He stands firm as Argan sneers, the vampire lord mocking the hero's current strength. The undead aristocrat claims that even if his power has settled, it remains far too meager to pose a threat to a being of his stature. He ignores the taunts and prepares to strike, a sudden, intense radiance beginning to bleed from his blade. The sight of this burgeoning energy catches the vampire off guard, his arrogance momentarily replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion and alarm. The swordsman challenges the self-proclaimed king of demons to endure the coming storm, identifying the glow as the light of hope. He declares that this power is destined to save everything by purging the darkness that Argan represents. He lunges forward with a decisive cry, the brilliant energy of his sword erupting into a blinding flash. The vampire can only scream the hero's legendary name as the overwhelming light begins to consume his physical form. The hero watches as a massive pillar of radiance pierces the night sky, visible for miles across the city. Argan disintegrates into nothingness, unable to comprehend how a mere mortal could wield such divine power, while the companions celebrate the hard-won victory. He turns his attention to the saint in the quiet aftermath, gently reminding her that she was never meant to carry the weight of the world alone. She looks down, admitting that she had felt isolated by her regrets until this moment. The young man offers a warm, sincere smile, telling her that his gratitude for her presence has remained unchanged for 5 centuries. His words bring a soft blush to her face, reaffirming the deep bond they shared in the distant past. Nearby, the mage approaches with a look of contrition, offering a heartfelt apology for her earlier doubts. He responds by showing her a ring, a physical token he describes as the ultimate proof of the bond they have forged together. She becomes visibly flustered by the gesture, waving her hands and insisting that her help was only natural given the circumstances. The saint watches the exchange with a quiet, knowing expression as the tension of the battle finally fades. The warrior princess joins the group, teasingly noting how close the two of them have become during the ordeal. He agrees that the immediate threat has been dealt with, signaling a moment of well-deserved rest for the weary party. Far from the recent battlefield, at the site known as the Evil God's Temple, a place of extreme peril, a mysterious figure moves through the shadows. The stone walls are choked with vines, and the air is heavy with the scent of decay. Inside, the hooded stranger steps over the fallen forms of those who failed to conquer this place. Reaching a heavy door, the figure pauses, a sense of grim satisfaction radiating from them as they declare that their search has finally come to an end. He raises a hand, clutching a dark, polished sphere that gleams with an ominous light. This is the demon god's jewel, a relic of immense and terrible power. As he gazes upon it, he proclaims that with this artifact, a new demon king will soon be born into the world. The group gathers on the steps of the Grand Cathedral, the weight of their recent battles finally beginning to lift in the quiet morning air. They are greeted by the Archbishop, who offers his profound gratitude for their victory over the demonic threat. While the young hero humbly insists that the responsibility for the conflict lay with them, the elderly cleric maintains that their intervention saved the church from total ruin and kept the chaos to a minimum. He looks out at his companions with a warm smile, marveling at the fact that such a diverse group could find common ground and stand together once more after everything they have endured. Suddenly, the two women flanking him surge forward, clinging to his arms with an intensity that catches him completely off guard. They speak of the centuries they spent waiting for this very moment of reunion, leaving the mage to watch the display with a look of utter bewilderment. He stammers in surprise, his face flushing as he tries to process the sudden, overwhelming display of affection for both the saint and the princess, who seem determined not to let him go. Nearby, the demon princess stands apart from the celebratory mood, her gaze distant and troubled. Noticing her withdrawal, the young hero calls out to her, his voice laced with concern as he asks if something is weighing on her mind. She remains silent for a moment, her thoughts drifting back to the conflict and the deep-seated hatred she witnessed. Her dream of a world where humans and demons live in harmony feels fragile, especially when she remembers how stubbornly the vampire lord rejected the very idea of equality. Her heart heavy with doubt, she wonders if her vision for the future is nothing more than a selfish fantasy, an indulgence that ignores the harsh realities of their world. Across the small circle, the saint admits that despite her newfound resolve to lead her people forward, a lingering sense of unease still tugs at her heart, mirroring the princess's own internal struggle. He counters her doubt with a steady, knowing look, suggesting that perhaps the path ahead isn't as uncertain as she fears, and that their shared experiences have already begun to bridge the divide. He stands by as a young man approaches with a hurried pace, his baker's cap slightly askew as he catches up to the group. With a look of genuine gratitude, the newcomer explains that he had been searching for them to offer his thanks for their intervention during the recent conflict, relieved that he made it in time. He extends a basket filled with fresh, warm bread, admitting that while such a humble gift might seem out of place, he insists they take it for their journey ahead. Sestina reaches out, her fingers brushing the wicker as she accepts the unexpected offering with a soft expression of thanks, touched by the gesture. He offers a warm, parting smile, remarking that the encounter has proven to him that kind-hearted individuals exist even among those he once feared. This simple acknowledgement leaves the demon princess momentarily speechless, her eyes wide as she processes the weight of his words and the bridge they represent. Leaving him behind, they continue their walk through the city, and the young hero observes that the baker had been a silent witness to their battle. The realization that their actions were seen and appreciated by the common folk brings a quiet sense of satisfaction to the group as they move through the streets. They move past the stone buildings of the capital, the hero reflecting on the complexities of their mission. He acknowledges that while the path to true peace is fraught with those who cling to old hatreds, these small moments of connection are the foundation they must build upon to change the world. While she reflects on the gift, he turns his attention to his companions, offering a sincere word of thanks to the mage for her unwavering support. Beside him, the demon princess clutches the basket of bread to her chest, her mind drifting back to the kind words of the townspeople who have begun to see her for who she truly is. He catches her eye and offers a reassuring grin, promising that as long as they stand together, the future they envision is within reach. She meets his gaze with a newfound brightness in her eyes, her voice steady as she affirms her commitment to their shared cause and the hope it brings. As they speak, they are joined by the saint and the warrior princess, both of whom echo the sentiment of hope. The saint speaks of a long-held wish from centuries past that is finally nearing fulfillment, while the princess reminds them that this dream of unity is one they all carry in their hearts. They stand as a united front before the grand architecture of the city, the demon princess looking toward her mentors with a heart full of resolve. She silently vows to give her absolute best, knowing that the bonds they have forged are the key to overcoming the challenges that lie ahead. While she looks on with renewed purpose, he rallies the group with a spirited call to action, noting that with everyone finally assembled, it is time to answer the king's summons. His words are met with a chorus of enthusiastic agreement as they turn their steps toward the castle, ready for their royal audience. He leads the group through the bustling market, explaining that he has already used Lapis's magic to alert the princess of their arrival. He speculates that she and Teresa are likely preparing a warm reception for them at this very moment. As he speaks, the demon princess leans in uncomfortably close, her eyes narrowing with a hint of suspicion as she questions the nature of his relationship with the princess. He breaks into a nervous sweat, while nearby, the young warrior and watches the exchange with a confused expression, wondering about the identity of this Teresa. The tension breaks as he offers a sheepish laugh, prompting a quick apology from the demon princess, and quickly interjects to tell them both to stop their bickering. Meanwhile, within the refined halls of the palace, Princess Charlotte claps her hands in delight, her face beaming with anticipation at the news of the group's imminent arrival. She reflects on the return of the legendary heroes party, envisioning the trio of warriors whose exploits have become the stuff of local lore. Her expression shifts to one of fierce, almost unsettling determination as she declares that with such power on their side, the threat of demons is finally a thing of the past. Beside her, the vice-captain of the knights watches with a flicker of concern at the princess's intense fervor. The knight confirms her own joy, though the princess admits she was genuinely taken aback to discover that the hero of legend was none other than the knight's own brother. This revelation prompts the knight to look back on their childhood, recalling how her brother had always been a figure of courage, never hesitating to rush to her aid whenever she found herself in peril. She smiles warmly, realizing that while the news was a shock, it also felt perfectly natural. In her heart, she had always known he was destined for such greatness. The princess agrees, noting that to her, he has clearly always been a hero, and expresses her sincere happiness that the siblings have finally been reunited. She glances at the ornate clock on the wall, realizing with a start that the hour is much later than she anticipated and the time for their guest arrival is imminent. Turning to her companion, she issues a series of rapid instructions, commanding that the king be informed of the situation immediately while they make the final preparations for the feast. As the knight moves to obey, a sudden, rhythmic rattling of the glassware on the table catches her attention, signaling an unnatural disturbance in the room. Before they can investigate the source of the tremor, a massive, glowing geometric seal erupts from the floor, bathing the entire dining hall in a blinding, magical radiance. The two women stare in wide-eyed shock, quickly identifying the phenomenon as a high-level teleportation circle that has bypassed the palace's internal defenses. While the light fades, a cloaked figure steps out from the center of the seal, casually noting that their arrival point was slightly off-target from the throne room. The knight immediately shifts into a defensive stance, demanding the intruder reveal their identity. Without a hint of hesitation or fear, the stranger reaches up with a steady hand and pulls back the heavy fabric of his hood. He reveals himself to be Emperor Garch, greeting the stunned princess with a condescending remark about how much she has matured since their last encounter, his presence radiating an effortless authority. His gaze then turns toward the knight, acknowledging her as the one known as the Sword Saint, while she silently reels from the overwhelming, crushing weight of the power he emanates. He is met with a sharp demand for answers as the princess questions why the ruler of the Sarbila's empire would infiltrate her home alone, but he only responds with a mocking laugh at her perceived innocence. He held the dark, pulsating orb aloft, questioning if they truly grasped the gravity of an enemy sovereign standing within their very walls. With a manic grin, he channeled his energy into the artifact, declaring his singular ambition to seize the kingdom for himself. His gaze sharpened, eyes narrowing into predatory slits as the power within him began to overflow. Suddenly, a violent pillar of light erupted from his position, the sheer force of the magical discharge leaving Teresa and Charlotte reeling in disbelief at the sight of the transformation. As the light faded, he stood revealed in a monstrous new form, sporting massive obsidian horns and an aura of pure malice that led Teresa to wonder aloud if he had become a demon. He scoffed at the comparison, his voice dripping with disdain as he commanded them never to liken him to such lowly, inferior creatures. Towering over the two women, he boasted of possessing a strength that eclipsed even that of the Demon King, prompting a desperate inquiry from Teresa regarding his ultimate goal. He clenched his fist, his voice booming with the certainty of a conqueror as he vowed to not only claim this land, but to eventually bring the entire continent under his heel. When Charlotte pressed him for a reason behind such senseless ambition, he merely offered a cold, dismissive glare, stating that those marked for death had no right to the truth. Without further warning, he lunged forward with blinding speed. Yet he found himself momentarily surprised when Teresa managed to react to his strike, acknowledging that her title as Sword Saint was more than just a hollow boast. He looms over them, his presence radiating a sinister, suffocating aura that threatens to crush Teresa's spirit. Desperate to protect the princess, the knight urges Charlotte to flee while she still can, her grip tightening on her blade as she struggles to remain conscious under the weight of his overwhelming power. Seeing no way to dodge or block the impending strike, she resolves to pour every ounce of her strength into a single, desperate gambit. Observing her resolve with a cold, predatory gaze, the Emperor decides to make her the first test of his newly acquired demonic strength. As she lunges forward with a cry, her blade aimed to cleave the sky itself, he merely raises a hand with effortless disdain. With a flick of his finger, he intercepts her ultimate technique, mocking her speed as if she were moving in slow motion. The force of his counterblow sends her crashing into the floor, her body broken and her sword cast aside. Looking down at the fallen warrior, he voices his disappointment, finding the vaunted power of a sword saint to be utterly underwhelming. He merely scoffs at the display of weakness, turning his back on the defeated pair as he prepares to move on to his next objective. While Charlotte screams her name in terror, the knight can only whisper a plea to her brother with her fading strength. Having left the princess unconscious amidst the ruins of the chamber, he moves on. While far from the palace, Kenya and his companions stand unaware of the tragedy, even as a silent, desperate prayer for salvation echoes across the land. The group arrives at the gates of the royal capital Fozilia. Kenya is beaming with excitement, eager to experience his first visit to a human castle. Lapis and Sestina follow close behind, though Lapis seems slightly exasperated by his infectious energy. Suddenly, a jarring sound echoes from the castle heights, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. He and look up in shock as a dark, ominous presence begins to manifest, casting long shadows over the ground. Sensing the shift, the warrior and the saint exchange worried glances, and reports that the mana signatures of Teresa and Charlotte have suddenly flared up, while Sophia detects a bizarre energy that feels neither human nor demonic. His face hardens with a grim realization. Gritting his teeth, he signals the group to move immediately, knowing that every second counts in the face of such an unknown threat. They burst into the castle chambers to find a scene of chaos. Teresa lies sprawled on the floor, clutching a wound. As he rushes to her side, she gasps for him to ignore her and prioritize the safety of the princess. Nearby, the sight of Charlotte's motionless body sends a wave of dread through the room. A voice confirms the worst. Her heart has completely stopped beating, leaving her life hanging by a thread. Horrified, the saint realizes the nature of the injury. She explains to the others that the wound is inflicted by the same ancient curse that Kenya suffered 5 centuries ago, and the situation is rapidly deteriorating. She refuses to give up, her resolve hardening as she looks down at the fallen princess. Sophia reminds herself that she gained her powers specifically to prevent such tragedies, noting that Charlotte's mana still lingers within her body. With a fierce determination in her eyes, she takes full responsibility for the rescue. She swears upon her title as the great saint that she will not let the princess perish under her watch. The saint begins her incantation, her hand glowing with a brilliant, purifying light. As he watches in silence, she calls upon the heavens to heal the body and pull the soul back from the brink of death. She channels her divine power, a blinding light erupting from her hands as she invokes a perfect heal to mend the princess's broken state. As the radiance fades, Teresa looks on in confusion, asking what transpired, but Kenya quickly reassures her that the saint will undoubtedly save Charlotte. Despite his words, the weight of her failure crushes her. She laments that even with her title as a sword saint, she was powerless against the Emperor of Cerberus, who now seeks to seize the entire nation. Desperate and tearful, she clutches at him, pleading for her big brother to save both the king and their country from the encroaching darkness. Recognizing the urgency, the saint instructs the group to leave the princess in her care and rush to the king's side, while he notes a powerful surge of mana ascending through the castle. With a sharp nod, he rallies his companions, declaring it time to move as they sprint toward the source of the disturbance. Elsewhere in the palace, a tense confrontation unfolds on a grand balcony where a lone knight stands before a hulking, horned figure. The demonic entity, Garcia, breaks the silence with a chilling greeting, acknowledging his old acquaintance, Alexei. Staring back with grim realization, the knight observes that his former peer has finally descended into the depths of becoming a demon. Unfazed by the accusation, the monster sneers, promising to reunite Alexei with his daughter in death, a threat that leaves the knight reeling in shock. He tightened his grip on the knight's throat, relishing the sound of the man's desperate gasps for air. The brutal display was interrupted as the heavy doors burst open, and the young hero's voice echoed through the hall, demanding an end to the violence. Without hesitation, the boy lunged forward, his blade gleaming with holy light, only to be met with the impossible. The demon caught the edge of the sacred steel with nothing but his bare, hardened flesh. Unfazed by the divine weapon, the monster let out a low, mocking chuckle while the others looked on in horror, realizing the sheer scale of the power they faced. Seeing an opening, the wounded knight urged his companion to move, but the demon merely swatted the air as if brushing away a fly, dismissing their desperate maneuvers as nothing more than petty tricks. As they attempted to regroup, a massive, clawed hand extended toward them, a cold promise that no one would be leaving the chamber alive. Suddenly, the very air in the throne room began to distort, and a colossal, dark magical seal erupted from the floor, bathing the chamber in an ominous light. The surge of energy caught the ethereal woman off guard, forcing her to manifest a protective barrier that buckled under the weight of the dark sorcery. Amidst the chaos, the knight's eyes widened in a moment of clarity, finally recognizing the boy as the legendary hero Renya, and the blade, he carried as the holy sword arclight. Despite her efforts, the woman's shield began to flicker, and she warned that the barrier was designed to drain the very life force of anyone trapped within its grasp. She watches as the young hero acknowledges the warning, his face set in a mask of grim determination while the battle lines are drawn. The hulking demon, Garcia, sneers at the boy, recognizing him as the newly born hero while reminding him that the barrier's pressure will soon be too much for his companions to bear. Nearby, Guren stares in utter disbelief at the demon princess, the realization of her true nature finally dawning on him amidst the chaos. He turns his attention back to her, mocking her earlier attempt to intervene as nothing more than a brief moment of entertainment. The monster then taunts the hero for his failed tactical strike, his own arm pulsing with a dark, regenerative energy that renders the previous blow meaningless. In response, the hero lunges forward with a sudden burst of speed, but his blade is met by a flurry of monstrous appendages that sprout from the demon's back. He finds the boy's efforts more amusing than those of the Sword Saint's daughter, leaving the hero to question the true nature and motives of the creature standing before him. Clenching his fist, the demon declares a twisted ambition to end the cycle of ancient conflict and impose a permanent, forced peace upon the world. He is left stunned by this revelation, his mind racing to reconcile such a noble-sounding goal with a monster's brutal and merciless methods. It is a bitter irony, for 5 centuries ago, the world believed peace had been won when the previous hero finally struck down the Demon King. Yet conflict remains. Garcia looms over the others, his voice booming as he explains the grim reality. Without the Demon King's shackles, his kind simply ran wild, shattering any hope for order. He narrows his eyes, pointing out that the supposed peace the hero brought was a sham, as nations that once stood together turned on one another for petty gain. Seeing the shock on the young hero's face, the demon scoffs at the need for a useless savior, declaring that he has ascended to become a demon god who will rule through divine power. He is interrupted by a defiant shout from the youth, who rejects this vision of a world ruled by fear, insisting that a god's tyranny is not true peace. Stepping forward to join the protest, the princess mocks the demon's ambition, warning him that he is merely repeating the catastrophic errors of her own father. She stands firm, her voice ringing out as she declares that any peace built upon the foundation of total domination is nothing more than a fragile illusion. Infuriated by her insolence, the self-proclaimed god strikes out, but the hero meets the challenge, vowing that this time will be different because he is not alone. He raises his blade, which begins to pulse with a brilliant light, as he speaks of a future where humans and demons find common ground by reaching out to one another. With a final, resolute cry, the young man proclaims that a genuine peace will finally be achieved through their shared efforts. The demon dismisses these ideals as nonsense and unleashes a devastating wave of dark energy, the black rings of power threatening to consume everything in their path. He mocks their feudal alliance, pointing out that even together, they are no match for his overwhelming power. Kenya and Sestina remain grounded, the weight of the struggle etched on their faces as they listen to his condescending offer to join hands. She stares ahead, beads of sweat rolling down her cheek as the sheer scale of his strength begins to sink in. A sense of hopelessness flickers in her mind, questioning how they could possibly overcome such a monstrous adversary who seems to exist on an entirely different plane of power. The self-proclaimed god looks down upon them, urging them to surrender with what little dignity they have left, as the gap in their abilities is undeniable. Despite his words, the two warriors struggle back to their feet, their resolve hardening as they refuse to let the battle end here. Their hands tighten around their hilts, knuckles whitening with the intensity of their conviction. They speak of the people they hold dear and the chains of precious lives that depend on them, vowing that they will not allow him to destroy everything they cherish simply because he deems himself superior. With a unified cry that echoes through the chamber, they raise their blades in defiance, declaring that they will never surrender. Their spirits, though battered, burn brighter than ever as they face their foe as one, their shared purpose creating a bond that transcends their individual limits. Suddenly, a brilliant radiance erupts from their weapons, catching them both off guard. The unexpected surge of light pulses between them, illuminating their shocked expressions as a new, unknown power begins to manifest from their combined will.